In this episode, I sit down with my friends Brandon and Nate, and they share with us their backgrounds. Brandon being a former middle school principal, Nate being a former pastor. They bring us up to date on how they implemented the infinite banking concept into their lives to now they're teaching the infinite banking concept through their corporation, Unlimited Life Concepts, and their new podcast, Cash Flow Legends. We had fun and hope you enjoy listening. Thank you.
Just like with ministry and feeling that calling on making sure people are hearing the truth, same way with this, we just want to make sure people are hearing the truth and making sure that it's being taught the way Nelson intended it. I mean, that's really important. The people like yourself who were close enough to him know what his vision was and know that that really, his goal was to make sure that that it really goes back to Austrian economics and libertarianism and everything like that. Really make sure that the individual is empowered more than they are today.
Mm-hmm. So, do you have anything to add?
Well, I was just thinking that early on, when we began to learn about this, it really has become clear to me that most things that we're taught, we're told. We're not asked how we think about something. And what I really was always mesmerized by with hearing the stories of Nelson is that he never gave the answer. It seems like he always just asked questions or told a story.
Make a lot of people angry too.
Yeah, but I think that's a great. So when Nate says correct, some people think, well, there's more than one way to be correct. Well, I know what he means. It means give someone the opportunity to truly go through a process where they decide what's correct for them and their value of what matters most to them. Because at the end of the day, most of us are taught to think that money is the most important thing, but the reality is it may be the lighter fluid to the fire that we want to grow, and it's just an inanimate object that we give way too much power to. And I just loved always when we get to talk about Nelson, many people will interact with us and ask about Nelson, and I'll say, I didn't know Nelson personally, but I've had the pleasure of interacting with lots of people who knew him well. And the thing I'm most proud to say about Nelson is that everybody says he'd rather that he knows you knew Jesus or knew of who Jesus was well before IBC. And I think that's been a big part of our calling is, Nate and I chuckle about this often, but we actually get to share that truth more than any truth. And it's not because we're telling somebody they need to believe something. We get to interact with them. We get to know them. We get to care about them. We get to hear how their family's doing. And Nate's had many opportunities, as have I, that people want to go, I want to know about this other thing. I want to know about Jesus.
Really?
Yeah, wow. Multiple times. And,
I had somebody call me one time who was a professed atheist, and he called me one time. We were friends. We got to know each other through Twitter, through infinite banking, all that. And he was telling me, he said, man, I just had something going on that hit me real hard, and I just needed to talk to you. And he said, why do I feel like I need to pray? And I said, well, that's the Holy Spirit, brother. And so, that's just one experience. I had another client of ours who reached out to me. He had some stuff going on in his life. I was able to share the Lord with him, and he let me know the next day that that he was part of the brotherhood now, and that he was following the Lord, and that was exciting. And I think that's a good lesson in being very transparent about who you are. Because when people need answers, they know who to reach out to. Mm-hmm. And there's been times, not because I don't tell people about infinite banking, but in my own personal life, as far as my circle and everything like that, I don't run around like trying to beat it in people's head or anything like that. But there's been times where I've been in a conversation with somebody, maybe a parent of one of my kids' friends or something like that, and he says, "Man, I know you do something with money, man. I've been reading about like whole life insurance. Do you know anything about that? I'm like, that's exactly what I do.
Yep.
I just had a conversation this last week that was just like that. He's like, man, I've been learning about whole life insurance. I was like, that's exactly what I do. So, letting people know. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about you and what you do is it's very matter of fact. And in fact, I don't remember who it was, but I was talking to somebody the other day and I was telling them that we were going to be on your podcast and they listened to your podcast.
Thanks for listening.
And I just started using the word premium over and over again in the conversation because I said, that's James's favorite word. And I appreciate that so much because there's so many people who shy away from that word.
Mm-hmm.
But the
commission, that's another word it's okay to say.
Absolutely.
We get paid to do what we do.
Yeah.
But I said this on Twitter recently, the broke mindset is that insurance is a necessary evil.
Yeah.
The wealth mindset is that insurance is a powerful tool and a privilege. And premium, in our world, premium is a privilege that we have the ability to pay because whole life insurance is the most exclusive asset that you can own because you have to qualify with your wealth and your health. And there's nothing else that you have to qualify for in that regard. And so if you can qualify for whole life insurance, like you need to own it.
I appreciate you saying that. It's every one of us, very limited opportunity to even pay a premium. Mm-hmm. The day is going to come soon enough. Me, you, everyone listening, won't have the ability or the opportunity to pay a premium. I don't care if it's health, income, the underwriters, it's a limited opportunity to pay a premium. Nelson had his fourth quad bypass. He was uninsurable.
Yeah.
And things like that. I mean, the fourth quad bypass doesn't necessarily happen overnight. That's scheduled. Right. Uninsurability can happen suddenly. Mm-hmm. You age right out. And so my encouragement is, to discover the infinite banking concept for yourself and give it a good, thorough vetting. And when you see what's going on, just like Nelson said, you'll know what to do. And if it makes sense to you, it is a privilege to pay a premium, and it's a small opportunity. And the larger premium that you pay that's legitimate within your financial ability and suitability, it's probably not big enough. It's like, look, I can get mad and quit paying a premium anytime I want. Mm-hmm. I've been paying premium a long time. I don't have to pay a premium if I don't want to. I can get mad and quit anytime I want to, and then have a guaranteed known value that I'm going to walk away with. Yep. When you think through, of course, in conversation, it's hard. I mean, you can't necessarily understand without looking at illustrations, and that's never where you should start. Mm-hmm. But when you look at illustrations over time, even the illustrations in Nelson's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, if you just understand the relationship of those numbers, it's like you'll be hard pressed to go out somewhere and do it better. Mm-hmm. And if you can go out and get it done better, God bless you. Whatever it is you're doing that's really good, if you'll practice the infinite banking concept, it will put jet engines to whatever it is you're doing. Mm-hmm. And then, prove us wrong. How about that? Mm-hmm. So, and I don't want to, I kind of want to go back, here, Dave Ramsey, educating in the church, and you're still trying to get out of debt, right? And now you become your own banker, and getting out of debt is just one thing that can be done with dividend paying whole life insurance structured properly. Tell me the contrast between those two methods. Me, I'm going to give up beans and rice and drive a beater or do whatever. And I'm a little bit pointed when I say that. It's like, I don't want to drive a beater. The older I get, man, the more comfort I like. Anyway, but I've, like Paul, I've learned to enjoy my standing, whether it's with or without. Okay. Uh-huh. The contrast between getting out of debt, get out of debt, mm-hmm. and then building true wealth, in my opinion, and then using that without interrupting that and getting out of debt that way. So the beans and rice or the infinite banking contrast of getting out of debt.
So Nate and I had both grown in our adult years up around the Dave Ramsey mindset. Okay. And a part of our story is that we were both living it, but from very different mindsets, but we were both heading to the same place. Okay. So we had paid off all of our debt until we had just built the house. We had no debt. But you realize money has to flow, and you start connecting when you become your own bank. You're looking back, you're like, oh.
Yeah, see what stops when money doesn't flow.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, it's kind of like when water's a problem in your town or something like that. You realize how important it is because it's not flowing. So when Nate and I connected on this and started diving in, I thought we may make it, but I was just going to just barely cross over the finish line in exhaustion. That's really how I felt. And so that was a big part of the realization is like, does your money work for you while you're sleeping guaranteed? Is it matched up to a guaranteed event in your life? And there was nothing matched up to a guaranteed event in my life at that point. So what I was able to do, and I don't want to share the number because money's relevant to everybody in a different walk of life and where they are, but my wife went to a very nice university close to here that she jokes that when she told me before we got married how much debt she had to the university, she knew I was a keeper because I said, okay, we'll figure it out. Okay. So our goal in the Dave Ramsey approach, which I would not trade, was to get rid of that debt. That was the biggest debt, and we poured everything towards it. And, the kicker there is that now knowing what I know and what you just said is that if I'd understood infinite banking at that time and I could have run it side by side or through that payoff, which debt payoff is just one of the things it can do. It's a multifaceted tool. Okay. We would have been in a whole different position of protection working backwards, which is not how we're taught. We're taught to play offense, to get the greatest rate of return, to get the least fees, and that's it. And so I have that clarity to be able to connect with other people. So I tell people all the time, the baby steps can work. There's just a much more efficient process to use them through. If that's your goal and that's what you need to do. So that's where my mindset was. And Nate had a different mindset that I'll let him touch on, but it was similar that it created some things that were not abundance minded, even though we were doing things different under the same Dave Ramsey thought process.
So Brandon basically being debt free, I was working through consumer debt at the time. I didn't drive beaters. I didn't drive brand new vehicles, but I didn't drive beaters either. And one of the moments that I got so excited for him about was when he called me and said he just got a newer to him Tahoe. And I was so excited for him because, that Suburban was just,
I upgraded by about 10 years. And it was still about 10 years old, but it was much nicer.
It wasn't as much of a drag for you until you learned about infinite banking and you're like, man, like I could actually take control of this, not have to, I can still be debt free in a sense, but actually take control of that equation. And so I was really excited whenever you told me about your Tahoe, but we were working through the debt that we had and through the strategy that was created based on what we had. We didn't have a whole lot to start with. We just started with what we had. They showed us how quickly we were going to be able to shift the wind current on some of those payments that were going out the door.
Now, you're talking about just starting the infinite banking concept. You're talking about going through underwriting, going through all the machinations between you and your wife that you got to go through and underwriting, and then you got to scrape up money to pay the god-awful premium where Mike Everett's going to make a commission and the life insurance company is going to keep your cash value if you die, right? And then they're going to charge you to borrow, and they're going to charge you interest to borrow your own money.
Yeah.
This is a startup that we're talking about.
Right.
And then y'all didn't have that much, but you had enough to get started.
So,
and I want to point this out because everybody loves it, and me too. I love big numbers, right? I love these big presentations, $100,000 premium, $1 million premium, and people pay those premiums. There's no doubt, but you don't have to start there. I mean, $250 a month, $500 a month. If you look at the last I heard, and I'm probably rounding, there's 330 million people in America. All right, at least half of them are adults or insurable age. Okay, out of those, so we're, I'll be conservative. 150 million people. All right, at least 70% of them are insurable. All right, so now we're down around 100. million people. All right. And every one of them can afford a $250 or $500, some $1,000 a month premium. And I'm pointing that out because, $500 a month is $6,000 a year. And if you paid $6,000 a year for 2 or 3 years, you got $12,000 or $18,000, you can run $60,000, $70,000 of debt through those policies in short order.
Yep.
So, I mean, you don't have to have this big premium. Okay. Thanks for letting me.
I want to touch on that real quick because we hear that often, that there's just, what as Nelson said, that most people's understanding of whole life is based off of someone else's misconception.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's probably one of the top 3 things we hear of, well, you only can do that if you're wealthy. And I'm like, look at me, brother. I'll show you how I started. But I think the education piece is so vital because when you see where money was leaking out of your life or opportunity was disappearing or you were giving away one use of your dollar, money starts showing up. And I think it's a fascinating thing how the brain works because now the brain goes, I can use that for my benefit.
That's right.
So we tell people, and that's been a heart of ours for a long time, is no matter what we do or create, anyone who's really willing to go on the journey to learn on their own, we want to make it available to them to start wherever they're at.
Yep.
Which it's more mindset than money.
Well, in that the headwind and tailwind conversation that Nelson talks about, that was what we were experiencing in our life at that time. We had some money that was sitting in mutual funds because we were doing the Dave Ramsey thing that had done well. We weren't losing money on them at that time. There was a good run on the market at that time, so they had done well. I wasn't...
On paper.
Yeah, on paper. I wasn't concerned with that money sitting there until I understood that it was creating no value for me whatsoever, and I had this headwind of interest that I was facing that wasn't keeping up with the earnings that was going on with the mutual
Dave Ramsey
funds.
talks about 12% long-term growth stock mutual fund that does not exist. Now you're talking about mutual funds. Was it in a qualified plan?
Nope.
Okay.
Just regular
so it's an
mutual funds.
open account, so you're going to pay taxes on it, and it's sitting there doing what it's doing. So you could have borrowed on margin against that.
I could have, but then I don't have the guarantees of the continual growth of those dollars.
Oh, there is no guarantees. What is the guarantee in the market? Most people say zero.
The only true guarantee that you could place on the market is that there's a possibility of losing all your money.
Yeah. There is no guarantee, right?
Yeah.
And you can go right past zero.
100%.
Just go borrow on margin.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, that's so true.
Okay. I'll quit interrupting.
No, perfectly fine. That's a great point because people talk about that. Oh, I could just loan against my account. Okay, but what happens if that account goes south and then you get margin called? Which not a lot of people talk about margin calls.
I just had a conversation with it's a client, and I won't share any names. A great, stellar young man. $67,000-$70,000 on a mistake. I mean, we all make mistakes, right? If you're wrong, you're wrong. It's okay. You just admit it and correct it and don't do it again, right?
Yeah.
$70,000 on a margin call.
Yep.
And what, you don't have it? No problem. We'll finance that bad boy for you. You're going to sell all these stocks short. That's what created the call anyway. And so you liquidate that and we'll finance that for you. 11%. Okay. All right. So,
Yep.
the big guys do margin all the time. It's like, right, not us. Okay. I'll quit. I'll quit.
So what Chris showed me, he didn't tell me what I needed to do, but he said, hey, if you did this, let's see what it would look like. And so, like I said, we started with what we could start with. We decided that based on our cash flow and everything that we could do a $10,000 annual premium.
That's a big number. You said y'all didn't have, listen, how many people at that time did you know that was paying $5,000 a year in premium?
That's true.
That $10,000
I'm
is
probably a little
change.
jaded right now at that number because it was a big number for us at the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a big number.
It's a big number now.
Yeah.
But we had, that was what we used to get started. And we just looked at how we could actually put that to work and start basically refinancing that debt away from the bank. Because that's really, when we're using our banking system to pay off debt, we're just refinancing that debt away from the bank where they're controlling the terms, they're getting the interest, and we're bringing that into our own system where now we control the terms and ultimately we get to benefit from the interest.
And y'all were doing that at a time, we're just now coming out of a 15-year low interest rate environment. I mean, the gophers in the home offices of the life insurance companies have never been in this position coming out of a 15-year low interest rate environment. And my point here is, arbitrage is really easy to demonstrate, right, when interest rates are high, but you and your wife are doing that when interest rates are relatively low.
Right.
And here now you're going to pay the life insurance company interest too. I mean, these are not small things that you have to work through.
Well, and for us, it really boiled down to the three things that we talk about so often. And it was the certainty, it was the control, and it was the efficiency of the money that was flowing through. And those were really the three selling points for us, was getting that certainty and control and looking at how efficient our dollars could become over time. It wasn't a very difficult decision for me. It was more difficult for my wife. But, ultimately we came together on that, and it worked out pretty well.
And so, and I appreciate that. So, getting out of debt, in the way I don't want to overgeneralize, but, I can spend the next 10 years of getting out of debt, paying cash for everything.
Yep.
And I can spend the following 10 years recapitalizing, for me and my family over that 20-year time period. Or I can capitalize and then collateralize and then repay. And then in 20 years, I'm way ahead of the comparison. If I capitalize, collateralize, control the debt, and then repay that debt compared to paying cash for everything and getting out of debt and then saving money, there's two different timelines.
Well, anytime money leaves your life, that represents time and momentum that you can never get back. And so one thing I love about being our own bank is that we don't have to worry about time and momentum, because we keep the momentum, we keep the pressure to move forward. And the timeline for us is just based on how life is going, because we control money going in and out of our system.
And how small town you live in? I'm like I gotta go. I mean, I'm aging. I'm having birthdays while we're sitting here. I'm under a timeline. No, I appreciate that. And then and the interest rate, in just getting out of debt, are you more inclined to pay a debt off sooner through the infinite banking concept, as opposed to the third-party lender? I get the accelerated, the velocity money. You want to pay off a credit card balance sooner. You want to pay off a mortgage sooner, right, to avoid all that future interest. And so I get that and understand that, and it's completely natural. But if I have, the ability to, accelerate a loan repayment from a third-party lender, and I also have the ability to accelerate a loan that I'm controlling through the infinite banking concept, is there a difference in the way you look at those two?
Let me touch on this. So when we started, my sole focus was paying off the house. That was the only debt I had, because my old way of thinking was, once I get rid of this debt, I'll be free. Now I understand the beauty of capitalism and how you can go create as much wealth as you want to. If you provide value, it'll follow. But here's what I would say now that I didn't even get till the last 2-3 years. If we all agree and embrace that we are our greatest asset, why wouldn't we start by insuring it to match up with the known event that is going to occur when the good Lord takes us off this earth? So now I look at it this way, go, I'd rather have the ability to pay off some of those debts and choose not to, because I know that my max insurability has been captured, and I'm always trying to increase it, right? Because of that privilege, to never have to disinherit anybody or anything that I love. So now it's really just a much more freeing thing to see the full court, if you will, and evaluate, well, that would free up some cash flow here, and I feel really good about that, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Or that, here's the thing that Nate and I talked about a lot in the past couple of weeks. It is almost impossible to put a number on stressors in your life.
Oh, yeah.
Until they are not there. So sometimes, and Mike says this a lot, sometimes it's just behavior and peace of mind. But you got to compare it to something else. Did you have that before you started this process? Yeah. And if you didn't, if the numbers don't math out but you feel better, there's a lot of value in the next things you're going to create.
That's worth something.
Yeah, that's worth a ton.
Yeah.
And unfortunately we've had to learn that the hard way a few times, but like I said, you learn from it and you move on.
When you really when you talk about value, you think about what are the most valuable pieces in my life. And when it comes to capital, our cash value, the way I think about it, our cash value inside of our policy is the most valuable capital that we can possess, because it's capital that we can leverage in an environment that we control. And there's not another asset on the planet you can do that with.
Yep. No, I agree. I still pay premium. I buy new policies. We finance, and we're like everybody else. Sometimes you get busy, and sometimes you might neglect this, you neglect that. But if I had outstanding loans, and we do, we have outstanding loans, and we have debt and real estate, and we can be debt free tomorrow. But my point here is that if I'm going to pay something down, if I value the third party lender's money that didn't exist until I signed, my everything that I own today, and then my future production to guarantee that loan, and at whatever interest rate that we agree to, but they set it, right? And then they control the terms of repayment. And if I value their capital to that extent, whatever it is, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 18, I see HELOCs at 8 and 9. Mm-hmm. I see these lines of credit with accredited investors at 12 and 14%. Shut the front door, which, I'm okay, but I'm not impressed. It's like, oh, you're 14% loan for an accredited investor. It's almost like you're hugging and punching the person at the same time. Right?
Hugging and stabbing.
Right. Or so there's a third party debt, or I have this outstanding loan to a life insurance company. And, it could be a lower interest rate. I'm beating them up on interest, but there's still an interest that's paid directly to the life insurance company, directly profiting the life insurance company.
The most secure debt ever.
Yeah, well, it's okay if it's a mutual company, too, and I'm the owner of the company because I'm a policyholder of the company. Yeah, I want you to be profitable. As a matter of fact, life insurance company, if you're not, I'm not interested. I'm going to move away. So I'm going to make them profitable. I'm okay with that. And I'm indirectly supporting the profitability of my policy. It's like, okay, I'm all good with that. But if I'm going to work extra hard and pay extra attention to pay that down, why wouldn't I do the same thing? It might be a lower interest on a policy loan, but it's still interest that's going against me, right? Anyway, I'm just saying whenever I control it, when I'm controlling the banking function, I find myself to be a little bit more motivated to get it done and make it happen. I got
to tell you the story. So on the way here, we drove in this morning, Nate from his town and me from my town. It's about a 3-hour drive. And we have the ability to pay a premium in one of our policies the business owns. And Nate and I were game planning it yesterday, and that part of that window is going to close. So you better believe I am on the phone calling the company going, how much premium do I have the privilege to pay? And how do I get that to you as fast as possible and get it done? Because of the privilege. Because the whole thing about having the ability to do something, and Nate uses this example a lot, everything that we use is probably borrowed or stolen from somebody we listen to on a podcast, but a good simple way is that if you and I both have a bank, James, that we started, and you got paid $100, would you ever walk across the street and deposit it in my bank?
For a rate, yeah.
Yeah.
If you pay me enough, I might, yeah.
You might, but I'd have to pay you quite a bit, wouldn't I? If you had your own bank.
Yeah, I value my capital more than yours, 100%. You betcha.
So it's really cool when you get to one of our most successful client stories that we have. One of my favorites to tell was a teacher that I taught with, and they would tell you that they were so scared to ask us for help, even though we had a great relationship. They trusted me because they didn't want to open up the chaos they had created. Okay. Yeah. Which is really the truth for almost everybody we ever work with. We all got things we wish we wouldn't have done. So the very short version is they had 10, 12, 15 credit cards at 18, 20, 22, 28, 30% in less than 3 years because they were already disciplined. Discipline was never the problem. It was not knowing the rules of the game.
Yeah.
Once they got to understand the rules of the game, they flip all that outside debt to inside debt. They go from $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 as teachers going out the door to coming back through their system.
Yeah.
And now they own real estate less than 3 years later.
Yeah.
Just because they started playing by the rules of the game that they could win with. Yeah. And that was very little premium. It was just how the pieces flowed together.
Yeah.
And so that's the power of being the bank.
Yeah. That's incredible.
And, I'm going to share this because it might help somebody.
It'll help me.
I've battled scarcity for a good portion of my life. And it wasn't until recently really talking through that and working through that I discovered it's because of the losses that I've had along the way, people that I've lost in my life that were really close to me. And I know I'm not different from other people out there who've lost people in their lives, but a combination of that scarcity that I dealt with and also listening to Dave and him being so risk averse in so much of what he teaches, I had developed such a scarcity when it came to money that even when I had money to pay bills, I was scared to pay bills because I felt like as soon as I pay this money, I don't know if I'm ever going to get another paycheck. Mm-hmm. Like I'd gotten locked up so much by that. And I know if I felt that, there's probably somebody else out there that feels that right now or has felt that at some point. And that was one of the things that really helped unlock that piece for me was understanding that I could actually create this environment, create the aquarium, so to speak, where money goes in and now it can cycle through my life and it doesn't necessarily have to leave. And even whenever I was paying off debt and everything like that, I was still having to battle that back and forth, but then realizing that, hey, I was just creating this debt inside my policy now, and now I control that and I can manage that myself. And, that was something that was really helpful for me and really started to unlock that abundance mindset and freed me up quite a bit because it was a big struggle for a long time.
I can see that. I mean, I grew up poor. I say that, but you really wouldn't know it if everybody around you didn't tell you. Uh-huh. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I had a great life. And, I'm just saying that I grew up with it's somewhere along the lines of scarcity, FOMO, fear of missing out. I'm not scared to pay bills or wasn't then, but it was like, until you've been without, you may not understand. Mm-hmm. I don't know. But I also like to touch on, I don't want to jump over this because the churches and nonprofits, if the churches would ever, and I know there's some pastors, preachers, priests and evangelists. I mean, I'm sure y'all have a lot of clients in ministry in some form. But I'm talking about on a little bit larger scale, maybe. If the churches, oh my gosh, would kick all the rats out of the church, okay, and then bring some, capitalism, free, fearless thinking about money and about life insurance could freaking change the world.
Yep, 100%. Absolutely. We live in a small town, as I've said, and we changed churches when I left education and went to a church that was closer to our home so our kids could be involved and all that. And our pastor of this church is actually one of our clients. And I was sitting in one of our first, they call them family meetings, but business meetings. And the printout comes out, and we've been a very blessed church for a small church. And my wife had her hand on my knee, okay, squeezing a little bit, because when we got to the line item of how much cash is sitting doing nothing and growing and not being used in ways that could benefit and bless, she's like, we're new.
We're new. It's too soon.
No.
Don't ruin it
yet. They like you right now. Just give it a little bit more time. And it's been interesting because many of our members of ULC have come from our church lately.
ULC, Unlimited Life Concepts.
Yep.
ULC.
And we have that conversation, and they will bring it up once they see it, and they'll ask the same thing you're saying. They're like, why do you think the church can't wrap their brain around that? And the only answer that I can give succinctly and short is unlearning's harder than learning. And arriving in many churches has taken full-fledged, dug its heels in. But I've had the privilege of visiting with it with my pastor many times. And Nate and I are hopeful and prayerful that one by one, maybe we can build that 10%, so to speak, as the Laura Murphy podcast says, and start shifting that, because the power that could be, and I've heard you and Ryan talk about it all the time, and I 100%, we both agree, we're like, if it can just catch, and it can go the next mindset and the next mindset. But
I find that, the elders, the board members, the trustees, whatever their title is that support the pastor, right? Mm-hmm. Invariably, there's a life insurance agent on there or a financial expert.
I was just about to tell you, a financial advisor that they've worked with forever.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And probably, the 80-20 rule, they probably, donate 20 or 80% of the donations to the church. Mm-hmm. So there's a relationship there there's a conflict there. I'm not saying it's a bad conflict.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a conflict to change. Dave Ramsey and I've done a couple of, Ryan's done a podcast on Dave Ramsey. I've talked to enough disparagingly about that whole concept. But it's there. It's in the church. If you're going to teach something, teach the whole truth. Teach both sides, right, wrong, or different, wherever you believe. It's like you in education. Mm-hmm. You're going to teach them what to think. You're going to teach them how to think. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So I've had the privilege to begin going through, actually was just ordained in as a deacon. And it's really been on my heart, of like, Lord, if this is something that you're going to allow to come up, great, I'm ready, but I know it's not going to be, hey, gentlemen, I'm the 42-year-old here, and many of you double my age at least. Listen to what I have to tell you. I know, but luckily we've been around long enough and had great mentors that that's not going to be the approach that's going to work. It's going to have to be, it's going to have to be a little bit at a time, hopefully. So.
Yeah, well, I think if the churches are like everybody else, they're full of people, right? I mean, that's the problem in the church is the people in the pews.
That's true.
So when I was a pastor, my uncle's a pastor also, and one of our family get-togethers, we were talking and just kind of sharing, venting, I guess you would say. And I made the statement, if it wasn't for people, ministry would be really easy.
True statement.
But I'm not on staff at a church right now. We're plugging into a local church, and I've had great conversations with our pastor, and he's going through our process and learning, and very, very interested in how he can implement that, and hopeful that we might be able to, one day get it into the church, and hopefully that'll spread. We've had great conversations with other pastors across the country that are becoming more and more open to it, and I think the key is starting with the pastor initially and having sort of a proof of concept in his life and letting that kind of spill over into.
I think a piece you touched on, though, is also important because we're starting to see it. I'm sure you are too. When you come out of this, never-ending high of low interest rates and, it's always benefiting me, and a different truth starts coming available, then people start asking more questions. So although we would never wish that on anybody if it's going to create struggle, it's been pretty easy for a financial advisor to look okay to a church for a while. Okay, so that's starting to change.
Yeah.
And I had that conversation with him. He's like, well, they always just said it would just do this, this, and this. And, for the most part it has, but it's looked a little different lately. And I'm like, might want to start asking why.
Man, it just doesn't, it is, however big the church is, 5 deacons, 10 deacons, 7 deacons, 12 deacons. And everybody in there, they love the church. They're part of the body. They want good things for the church. They want good things for the people. They want good things for their children and grandchildren. They want that church to exist, and okay, well, all that costs money. You're giving money now anyway. And it's like, if you have life insurance, you can carve off a little percentage of the death benefit, right? Because we're all going to graduate, and leave it to the church. Maybe and I'm bringing that up because maybe you're unhealthy or you can't make it through underwriting or whatever. But if there's, pick a number, 7 deacons, 12 deacons, elders, whatever they're called, it doesn't take that much money, a $25,000, $50,000 face amount policy. It's like pennies to put those in force, and every dang one of them's going to graduate. Every dang one of them. And you do that for one generation. And oh my gosh, do you think that preachers will have to beg for money?
Yeah.
It's like, no. Anyway, and I'm being encouraging. Okay.
Well, and I think the point you're making really helps resonate in my brain is that's an easy conversation to have, because I'm not requiring anything of anybody other than, look, this is how I want to bless what is already something we're proud of, it we want to continue, so that opens up a lot more conversations. That's a really good framing. So I'm with you.
All right, so look, we've been coming up on an hour and a half. Anything you want to share in closing? Anything we didn't cover, should have covered?
No, it's been a privilege to be here for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, I
Greatly
appreciate it. Y'all coming in and enduring the traffic to get here. And there's some traffic this morning to get here, but I'll let y'all share that with your people.
Okay.
Thank y'all for coming in. I've had fun, and I think the people will enjoy listening. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Banking with Life podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe and click on that little notification bell. Otherwise, join us on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher for weekly content.